tukamāranga, te tuhi te rārama. Tēnei ho noho matāra nei, e rongo whakairi hea ki runga, kia tīna, hui e, tai ki e. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora, thanks Tim. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you very much for everyone for coming tonight and being here for the first initial screening of Toitū te Whenua. We hope that you can take some things home from this about what's going on out there, and also feel encouraged about the way we can move forward together. And I'd just like to say a big thank you for everyone that's helped make this a success. And Tim as well, Tim Firkin, amazing job on the cinematography and edit. Tim's a world-class filmmaker, so yeah, put your hands together, thanks. It's a bit of a privilege today to have Māni Prickett join us, come up from Wellington. She's going to be at the next screening as well, so thanks heaps, Māni, for coming up. Angus Robson, he's come up from Matamata, and of course John Burke, he's come down the line from Pukekoti, his exemplar farm. And I can introduce John. You've seen a little bit of his work. John is he's a leader in the horticultural space. He's done a lot for PSA, and helping getting that industry going. And he's definitely a thinker and a solutionist. So if there's a problem, John wants to fix it, and I think he's doing a fantastic job on his farm. So it really was quite an experience for Tim and I to get in and have a deep dive and look into all the different wetlands and just the passion that John here has for the natural world, and it definitely is infectious. So thank you very much, John, for the work you do. Yeah. And round of applause. And so Māni Prickett is a bit of an idol of mine. Fair few years ago now, Māni asked me to come on a road trip, which was called the Choose Clean Water, and I was just going to take a few photos, and they were going to write blogs about people and how they were affected, or their lifestyles or their families or their sports groups were affected by poor water quality and poor rules and regulations. And it quickly turned into a video trip. We did, I think, 25 videos in 28 days, and I'd never done video before, so that was a decent learning curve for me. And over the years, Māni has really helped bring the topic of fresh water to the table. It was after that campaign, it was number 2 election item, was it the 2017 election, and Māni continues to do great work advocating for our fresh waters. She was the winner for our Voice for Our Rivers, the Science Award in 2017, no, not that far ago, anyway, but yeah, so a round of applause for Māni for making it all the way up here. And Angus Robson is an inventor, an engineer, and a businessman, and he's also looking for solutions too. So Angus and I have worked together on a few campaigns around animal agriculture, or fresh water, and some forest collapse things. So yeah, we've got a bit of a history, and thank you very much for coming. And I think you guys could probably do a better job of introducing yourselves and what it is that gets your wheels turning, but it's great to have you on the stage here today. Yeah. I think before we start out, I'll just like to pass over to John, so if you have any comments or anything you'd like to share with the audience. Yeah.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for giving us, me, an opportunity to be on the panel. I was really interested in the film. These guys rocked up to my place about a year ago and said they're putting together a little documentary. And first time I saw it was tonight. Fantastic effort, really good. And I think as Kiwis, we've got some serious issues in Aotearoa to address, but they're not insurmountable. We've got to front up and deal with them, and we've got to deal with it as a team. And if you look at, say, weed and pest control, for example, is the recent document put out by Simon Upton, Space Invaders. You all should read it. And I mean, it involves sort of like a military-style campaign to deal with weeds across New Zealand. We're just doing it haphazardly. And we've been fortunate. We've used Jeff to do, and a couple of his colleagues to do a high-level strategy for weed and pest control in Pongakawa, where Waikokupu is located. And it sort of brought home to me what we need to do at farm level. Like we've got 300 hectares and I deal with all the weeds myself pretty well. You know, I drive down the road, I've got regional council that came and inspected all our retired areas the other day and gave us a list of, we've got minor weeds, and the guy who inspected us said he's really impressed with what we had, which is heartening for me anyway. But all the weeds he listed were the weeds that are down the roadside, just around the corner, up and down the road on the railway lines. Well, how does that work for a farmer, you know? So you've got Western Bay who are not dealing with the weeds. You've got Rail New Zealand. You've got Transit. You've got Western Bay of Plenty Regional Council not even including those weeds on their list. It's just stupid. I'm starting to rave. But anyway, you can ask me some questions later. But it's a fantastic film, and I think it just highlights the mahi we've got in front of us, but it is all doable. That's my message.
Okay. Kia ora everybody. I'm not sure where I can add my voice in this, except that probably if there's questions about policy, and particularly freshwater policy, that's what I've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm sure you were having the same sort of emotional response to that movie that I was, which was kind of this wonder and awe and sort of incredibly sort of moving moments of seeing how beautiful this part of the world is, and then the sort of horror and deep distress of seeing how we're treating other parts of it. And I think that's true of the Bay of Plenty, but it's also true of the rest of the country. And I've just driven up from Hunterville today, and driving up the centre of the North Island, I feel like that's the emotional roller coaster you're on the whole way, you know, distress and then awe and then distress and then awe. And so it's pleasure to be here, and great work, Jeff.
Hope this works. Great job, Jeff and Tim. I've seen it once before and on my small screen, and it's much better on the big screen. I grew up in Edgecombe, and so I understand the area very well. Been to most of the places that are in the movie, and very disappointed looking for clean fresh water in the bay and not finding any, and that's a lot of what's driving my campaigning and will to sort some of these things out.
Are there any questions that people are holding on to? Now's probably a good chance to even comments or from the floor.
I do think that's a question I can answer, and there's sort of there's a theory part of it, and then there's a practical part of it, so I'll sort of break it down into 2 parts. The first is that, in theory, when you're looking at the freshwater policies, or the national policy statement for freshwater management, to be nerdy about it, when you're looking at the freshwater policy is, in theory, it's designed to work on a catchment by catchment basis. So it's designed to look at the catchment, so where you are, identify what the state of it is, but also how it might be made healthier, what its problems are, and how you can make it get it back up to health if it's been degraded, or maintain it at health if it's one of those beautiful rivers that we were seeing on screen before. So in theory, there's a catchment process happening through the regional planning process, and that should support people who are doing the groundwork mahi, who are doing the work like John's doing, who are noticing, where their contaminants are coming from on farm, and those two things should match up, really, in theory. The problem is when you try to. The problem is that community doesn't always mean community. And when you are trying to do a regional plan, there's this idea that community can come together and develop these catchment by catchment plans. But actually what we're finding is that it's not really the community voice that's being heard in that plan making. Most often it's the people who are really, really well resourced, who have lots of money, who can pay representatives to sit in a process. They can sit there for as long as they need to get the outcome that they want. And people who are really the voice of the community, the voice of mana whenua, the voice of the locals, they're the ones who are sort of doing it in their evenings. They're staying up until 3 a.m. writing submissions. They don't have that. They don't have the ability to stay at the table as long as they need to get the outcome that they want for their community. And so what you find is that you have this on the ground work coming up, and you have this theoretical framework that should be supporting that community work. But what we're finding is that that's been disrupted, and in many cases, I'd say I go as far as to say sort of manipulated by people who have the most resources and can get the outcome that they want. And that's why, I support what Jeff's film is trying to communicate, which is that, our regional councils are really letting community down by not being there as the enforcement agency. They're the only group that has that enforcement capability. Communities can't enforce rules. They don't, they're not the police, they're not the regulator. But basically, if the councils don't do that really crucial enforcement work, and they don't have a way of addressing power imbalances when you're making rules and plans, then you end up in a situation where those things aren't matching up.
Thank you very much, Mani. That's a good question, and I think you've summarised it really, really well.
So not quite a summary, but...
No, you have. You've really painted out the issue, and this is not just here within this region. It's what we're seeing is, across the nation, each regional council is letting down, but that's not to write off all the people that work for regional councils. That these are agencies that we need to be able to trust, and there's good people in there. There's just some rot at the top, and I think this is something that I think Angus feels very passionate about and has done a lot of work on. So maybe I'll pass the mic over to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. I believe there is regulatory failure in virtually all New Zealand regional councils. As Marnie said before, and I totally support, they are the only people we can turn to when we have a problem. So it's routine for Jeff to take video, post it on social media, and a regional council will say, where did you get that? We'd like to follow it up. And we don't dob people in normally in our campaigning. We're not about that. We're about presenting issues and raising public awareness, but not dropping people in it. But those regional councils have got vastly more staff and see it every day in their own area. There's Jeff taking one flight and showing a ton of stuff that they claim they've never seen before. But it goes back really deeply, in my view. We have a crisis of democracy around the world. We don't trust our institutions. It's getting worse, and the reason we don't trust them is because they're not trustworthy. They're there to present and act on our behalf, and they don't. They get captured by special interests, as Marnie pointed out, and we can't rely on them. And I'll give you an example. If Tim can move to one of the shots at Waitahi. By the way, this is not unusual for any regional council around New Zealand, whether it's Bill Bayfield, an Plenty Regional Council CEO, who effectively wrecked Canterbury by overseeing and implementing a whole mountain of stuff on behalf of the commissioners there, who refused for 7 years to provide any figures on excess water takes, despite promising to telemeter them in 2012, whether it's Regional Council in Tasman, who are trying to allow farming, what's the word I'm looking for? Operations that will wreck the Poo Springs and for the people who are trying to save the springs. Southland, it's the home of mud farming, which is an absolute stain on New Zealand. So if we walk back up from this river mouth to a shot of an unlined pond, do you know what I'm talking about, Tim? Yeah. We've got a deep conflict of interest within our regional councils. We've got people who run them at the governance level, whether it's chairman or councillors or whatever, who've got a pecuniary interest in the outcomes of their own rule making or breaking or enforcement. And so if you've got somebody who's got money to gain by not implementing rules or chasing them up, you're going to get bad results. So this pond, which you can see, that's where the digger's been. It's emptied along here. It's run into that drain, and that drain's run out into those shellfish beds. That belongs to the chairman of Bay of Plenty Regional Council. He's not only the chairman of that, he's the chairman of the rural sector of all of the regional councils. It's disgraceful. I'm getting a bit emo here, sorry. Someone else can take a question for a minute, but you get the idea.
Not a good look, Angus. One of the things as a point I want to make is that, we're having a crack at the regional council here, and they are the last line of defence for this, but I think there's a first line of defence here, and we've got to put the spotlight on these guys as well, and they're the brand owners. They're the brand owners of our primary products that we're marketing overseas. And we've got to walk the talk around what we're saying, say the Tiaki principles of Fonterra, for example. Fonterra have to walk the talk. It's good to see that they're starting to incentivise farmers for doing the right thing, but we need to put a lot of pressure on the Zesprys of this world, the Fonterras, the Silver Fern farms, to really make a difference. And they've got more tools in their toolbox to make change, and a lot of it's financial incentive. Their toughest tool in the toolbox is saying, we're not going to take your fruit, John Burke, because you're not meeting our standards in terms of environmental standards. So we need to really push that responsible procurement along, and I know, Angus, you're doing some stuff with McDonald's on that. And then we use the regional councils as our last line of defence, and these guys have to step up and really do what they say what they're meant to be doing in terms of being custodians for the environment.
Thanks, John. Marnie, did you have a burning statement? A question from the floor here?
Firstly, thank you for your film. There's a hell of a lot in this region to address, and I do agree with that. I agree with a lot of what's been said here, but what I want to raise for you is in response with Marnie was talking about the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water, and regional councils have to implement that by changes to their regional plan in 2024. That's when we notify in a formal way. Next year, regional council here will be engaging with the community mainly in the second and third quarters of next year. And we'll be doing that across the whole region. We've got a big job to do. You get to participate in that process then, and also in the formal submission process. I hear what you say about the difficulty of staying with that process. And it is the councillors of our council that ultimately make decisions on officer recommendations. I'm one of the officers in the freshwater policy team leading out that work. So that work's coming. It's the biggest change in our regional plan since it was first written back and notified in 2008. So it's an old plan. It's got a lot of shortcomings. So it's a chance for all of you to have a say about what you want to see in those plans. And I'd really encourage you to do that. I understand the misgivings, your concerns. Each councillor has one vote. Talk to your councillors. They are the decision makers that decide what gets notified. A hearing panel decides in the end after they've heard all of your submissions. So this is a long process, but it's worth participating in this round. So I'd just encourage you to look out for engagement and comms next year.
For a minute. I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Jane Nees. I'm a regional councillor. I've been a regional councillor for 5 terms. And I just want to challenge the statement that the filmmakers made a decision not to let the regional council know when they saw things on the ground that needed addressing. Because the regional council cannot be everywhere. And it's going to take the whole community to help us clean up our environment. And that's not just telling us when they see things that need to be addressed, and if we know about them, we will address them, but also for everybody to do what they can to clear up their weeds in their own properties, to join a care group and help the care groups do the most amazing work that's happening right across the region. And the regional council does a lot of work to support those groups, and we work very gratefully with people like Alison Jews and with John, who do sterling work on the ground. So what I'm asking you is that you join us in this battle to address this degradation, which really does need to be fixed for our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I might just say a couple of things on that. The first is that I think it is really important to engage with the regional plan making process. I'm not cynical about that. I think it's really important work to do. And I'll say one, and I'll just sort of say one really important change which I think has happened since the last sort of round of policy making, which I think is something for us all to hold on to and push as hard as we can on, and that is the obligations that are now in the policy around Te Mana o Te Wai. So Te Mana o Te Wai is, it's if you can just bear with me a moment while I sort of lay this out a little bit, because if you're not familiar with it, I think it's a really important part of the policy, and it's a big shift for us in Aotearoa about how we're approaching caring for the environment and how we're approaching environmental policy. So once upon a time, our policy was saying what we need to do is we need to balance interests around the environment. We need to somehow have these big scales up there, and we're going to say, we're going to have these trade-offs. The trade-off mentality just, it doesn't work. It only degrades. That's the only thing that can happen, because the environment just does not have the power that exploitative and extractive industry does. So a trade-off mentality doesn't work. The big shift in this new national policy statement is that it's not a trade-off. There is a hierarchy of obligation under the Te Mana o Te Wai framework, saying our first responsibility is to look after the health of the waterways themselves. That's our number one responsibility. We understand that by doing that, that will care for people, it will care for the health of our people individually, but also the health of our communities. And then once we've done those two things, once we've made sure that our rivers are healthy, our streams and lakes are healthy, and our people are healthy, then we can consider commercial interests and commercial activity in the water. That I think we shouldn't underestimate the shift in mentality that is from an old way of thinking about policy to, I don't want to say a new way, because it's not a new way, it's something that is fundamentally, it's a tangata whenua view of the world. So it's not new, but it is new to our policy thinking. So if we can hold on to that through these processes, I think we will be in a much stronger position. But I will challenge our regional council staff and councillor here and say what we need, what we all need, the communities here, but also the communities in the rest of the country, is we need you to address those power imbalances, because there are huge resource imbalances that exist. And if you look at regional planning processes, you see this enormous flush of interest from the community at the beginning and this ambition, and they are ready to go and they want to make a change and they're so fired up and they love where they live and they love their river and they're working hard and they're fundraising and they're doing all this incredible work and this deeply time consuming and involving and emotional work. And then you watch through those processes and you see who's at the end of those processes and sitting in the environmental courts, and that is not the community who are sitting in the environmental courts. And so we need you not to put the pressure, the people in this room are putting the pressure on themselves to do that mahi. I know everybody here is doing environmental work. I can guarantee it. They are already doing that work. What we need you to do is do that top level intervention and level the playing field and take the power away from people who have huge resources and not the best interests of the community at heart.
Thank you, Marnie. Thank you very much, Marnie. The challenge that you put forward to myself, Tim and myself was about seeing a few things, and Marnie's hit the nail there. How can we go around a region and in a few days or a few weeks, just from the side of the road, see a whole lot of critical source grazing, point source pollution, animals and waterways, you name it. The list goes on. There's a whole lot of stuff that didn't make the cut just from when we went out to have a look around, and that's not the issue. Those are issues in their own right, but for the regional councils to sort of just always be putting pressure on us, when was that, where was that taken? It's like, well, it's taken from the side of the road. Any time it rains, you can see that. So, I also encourage the regulator to do its job. Angus, do you have anything burning that you'd like to say?
I do, yeah. We work all over the country, and so the Bay of Plenty is not what I'd call special. It's not the worst, but it's typical. And what we see is not just that reporting things results in nothing, no matter how bad it is. The problems just get swept under the carpet, or then you have to OIA the answers to find out what even happened, because they won't keep you up to speed. But as Jeff said, these are the more minor things. The big issue is the strategic one, where we don't seem to have a plan. There's no plan for climate change in a regional council that I've ever seen. I'll give you an example of Canterbury, which has spent variously either 25 million or 60 million, depending on who you talk to, on a 30-year plan, which doesn't look any different to when they started, because they're trying to do a plan that solves the nitrate problem without addressing the nitrate. So meanwhile, they are poisoning people, which you'll read about in Timaru, more and more in shallow water wells all through Canterbury. They've effectively destroyed 300 trillion litres of water under the Canterbury Plains because of ideology. And the scientists told them miles in advance that this was what was going to happen. It's the same with the Upper Waikato. Bill Vance said in 2004, you're going to lose all of the quality of the Waikato River if you cut down all the pine trees and turn them into dairy blocks. Well, guess what? That's what we've got. And where were those politicians and those regional councillors then? Right behind it. And where are they now? Oh, we better have a hui and see what we can do. But it's too late. The horse is bolted, and that's a legacy pollutant. It'll take hundreds of years to disappear. And some of us fought that. I know Marnie did, Jeff did, I did, numerous other people did. And where did we get with engagement with your processes? Nothing.
Thanks. We had a question over here.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Tim. That was awesome. I hadn't seen it before. There's far too much of me on there, but it was all a great surprise, and you did a great job. And thanks also to Bay Trust for your support of Waikokupu and Rotorua Trust, for your support of, I was including both of you for your support of the Waikokupu project as well, because just going to these community groups, you know, we've been funded out of Jobs for Nature and also from local philanthropy funds. But that only lasts for a certain amount of time, and you get that great flush of activity, but then without support. And like Marnie said, it's a really, really tough space. It's a tough space on the people working in there. And you've got so many different conflicting interests, and you get overwhelmed with engagement and all the competing interests, trying to sort of snuff out things that you're doing. And I'll just go to the Te Waikarepupu Springs, where I've just been an expert witness in and been working on for the last 7 years. You know, that's one of the clearest water in the Southern Hemisphere. And the local iwi and a small group of us have been fighting for this for probably 7 years to get it protected with a water conservation order. And we've effectively run out of money, where a lot of us have just, you know, everybody's working in there just for the spirit to protect this taonga for New Zealand. And again, you know, we've got Tasman District Council, we've got Fonterra, we've got Dairy NZ, we've got Ravensdown, we've got Apatakaka irrigators. The list goes on, there's 10 of them. King Salmon, Fonterra, Dairy NZ, all just snuffing out our funds. So I'm not sure that we'll get future protection of some of the cleanest water in the Southern Hemisphere, despite trying. And so we need the communities to act, but we need our regional councils to support those communities to have an enduring spirit to last in this environment.
Thank you, Alison. I've been following the Waikarepupu Spring Court case quite closely, and you're doing a very good job down there. It is very alarming that we can have our best water up for tender really, and whoever's got the most money seems to be able to have the most influence. It's pretty scary. John, did you have anything on? I saw a question over here somewhere. Cheers.
I saw Jeff in shoes once and it blew my mind. I got a fright.
I wear shoes. Yeah, I'm sure a few of us could answer that, especially John being an outstanding land steward. For me, I would like to also say thank you everyone for coming along. And these conversations are what bring about change. It's not, billboards or flash T-shirts or whatever the other tricks that people use to try and induce change. It's conversations, and keep having conversations, whether they're hard conversations with your neighbour or with your regional council representatives, because they do make a difference, and that is how we bring about balance. While I've got the mic, I'd just like to say a big mihi to Bay Trust and Rotorua Trust for enabling these conversations to spark, and for the work that's gone ahead. Thank you. Oh, hold on, before we go ahead, maybe the question.
Just in response to what you're saying, I think the biggest thing, if you're looking at some sort of template or way to make change in your rohi, is the community projects, like Waikokapu. Project Paraori is another one I'm involved with. It's catchment based, and it's a community-owned project. So it's not it's changing the mindset from a have to make change to a want to make change, and engaging the whole community, everyone if we can, everyone doing their bit to make a change and make a difference. And that in turn is actually healthy for the community, to the big whānau. And that's probably the best way the best way forward from my point of view.
I'll just add a sort of to the side thing, which I think we don't think about enough, which will support the work that we are all doing for the environment and across those different sectors, and that is to how am I going to say this? To make sure that to recognise that not everybody is the enemy. You know, that we don't get into a fight with the wrong person, because I've just watched people sort of end up fighting each other you're not sort of trying to change things at the right level. You end up fighting with a neighbour, or you end up fighting with somebody in your community, when actually there's a systemic, it's a whole systemic thing that you're trying to shift. So the thing also that I think we need to be conscious of is that we're not, the thing that slows us down in the work, in this good work that people are doing, is when we end up sort of fighting on the ground and fighting each other, and not thinking and not lifting our sights up to changing sort of the flow-on effects of what the system is doing and encouraging us, and the direction that it's encouraging us in. Does that make sense? I just feel like I see people, I see people fighting the wrong fights and getting really distracted. Yeah.
I believe there's solutions to all of the things that we're seeing and talking about, and we already know what most of them are. Some of them need refinement, and they need experiments. And John's been experimenting on his place with good results. Then everybody gets to see that, and they know that they're not going to be wasting their time. So they can take John's example and run with it. But there's many, many other solutions which aren't easily tried or implemented, because either there's not a safe place to do it, or there's some small law that prevents it, or there's just other barriers to trialling. And the example that I'm going to give is from the Waikato, but it would work equally well here, is if you want to experiment with sediment trapping, which is one of our major problems, is sediment, you have to spend $1,800 on a resource consent and put in a whole mountain of plans for something you're not quite sure if it's going to work. And if you turn around and encourage people to just say, hey, here's some safe places, knock yourselves out on sediment traps here, and we're not going to hang you for your trials, we would end up with viable sediment trapping, which is a huge thing to get on top of at the downstream and lowland level. It's obviously different solutions for up in the higher hills where you trap sediment in different ways, and we should allow that too. But don't make it hard for people, and don't put a whole lot of barriers in there and only fund a few things, or try and work out who the champion is before you even start. Let people go. And that's just one example of one problem where I see, in the Waikato's case, the regional council getting in the way rather than helping.
I've got a few more questions to wrap it up. with the reach for this documentary, we've been passing around a clipboard so people can put down their email. We'll do a couple more screenings and then we'll put it out to everyone to try and share it out to their networks once it's gone live online. So if everyone wants to pass this around, if you haven't already, put your email down and we'll definitely keep you updated with how things go. And maybe we can talk a little bit about what we have planned to address the thing, but yeah, in terms of accountability in a sec. But yeah, Mary at the back there. Yeah. For sure. Thank you very much, Mary. The case that Mary referred to was the Long Bay development by Todd Properties. They tried to push over into the boundary of a catchment of a marine reserve and put 2,000 houses in about 100 hectares. And it was a huge fight. It was the third time the community had been to the Environment Court. We fundraised over $320,000 as a community. The council also chipped in a huge amount for the court hearing, so did Forest and Bird, and we got a result, but at the cost of people's health, and it was just a huge campaign, and what's to say that that won't happen again? So, the challenge is how do we balance out the power at the top? So,
yeah, there's a thing happening at central government. It happened a long time ago, back in the Ruth Richardson days, where when the RMA first came in, the government used the MFE, the Ministry for the Environment, used to submit on plans in council. So what happens is somebody puts up an idea to the council, or the council makes its long-term plan, and then people get to submit on it. And if they don't like what they see, they submit and talk to the hearings and so on, and decisions get made. But often, and I'm not sure how common it is now, but still fairly common from what I can see, you'll get proposals in regional plans that disagree with national legislation. And this is the point at which the government itself should submit against the regional council plan, but they don't. They used to, and then in a budget cutting exercise, they stopped. So the only people left are the likes of voluntary organisations or Forest and Bird and so on. Fish and Game did a huge amount of work. But these volunteers do all the heavy lifting that should be the job of the government, submitting to councils on non-compliant regional plans. And we need the government to step right back up and start submitting. And I really would value if people here would write to David Parker and say, we want MFE to submit on regional council plans.
Thank you. Have we got a question over here?
Thank you. This resonates with me. I'm on the committee of the Otakeri water bottling group that are trying to stop the bottling happening in on a massive scale in Bay of Plenty. We're still waiting for our result. We've done a lot of cake stalls, a lot of sausage sizzles and all sorts of things to raise enough money. So we're waiting on the appeal right now. But I just wanted to say I'm quite confronted by this image, and knowing that this is the chairperson of our main regulators, environmental regulators farm. That's correct, right? Yep, Doug Leader's farm. And what I do know is that we've got a new regional council that have just come in, and I'm not sure whether they have yet to elect their chairperson, but I don't think they have. So I think, and that the last chairperson has been re-elected. So it is an opportunity for, you'll be able to find the email addresses of all the new councillors on.
It's tomorrow that we elect the chair.
Tomorrow they elect the chair. So
Tomorrow morning.
so if, that's one opportunity. If you want to go home tonight and bust out an email, maybe take a photo of that and send it in, because I don't think that a chairperson who can't uphold their own rules and responsibilities has any right to be chairing our environment.
Thank you, and thank you for your work around water bottling. Yeah, I think it's probably about time to wrap up. Before we do wrap up, I just wanted to say that we sort of are working on a little bit of a plan. We would like to help. A lot of people go out there and take these photos, and a lot of people give some of the footage in here for this documentary has been given to us anonymously, And this, across the country, the people out there with your phones, people in the room here taking photos. Some people work on the farm, some people work with the industries, and we're looking at a way to try and centralise that data, because it is evidence essentially, and put it into a phone app or in a web app that will help hold our agencies accountable and show what's happening on the ground live. So again, if you want to chuck your email down on that list, we'll keep you updated with that app and the process, and if you want to be a contributor, that'd be neat as well. We did have one more question over here. I just wanted to introduce Peter Madison. He's a world-renowned entomologist, and he does a lot of work in John Burke's catchment, recording species, and my goodness, he's got the most incredible bug collection I've ever seen. So, Peter, here's the mic.
First of all, I'd like to sort of congratulate John, because I worked in this catchment, and say that just one of the issues, I think, is that when the Tamana stream comes out of the farm, it's looking perfect. But then between there and the sea, something happens. And our iwi down there say, we can't harvest shellfish anymore, the estuary is still stuffed. And that's one of the bits I think regional councils don't pick up their marine bit as well, that coastal bit is hugely important. And I don't know how we get that sort of combination of actually using our universities and polytechnics and whatever to put the information in about what's happening about estuaries. I know Simon Upton is looking at estuaries right now, and I think we need to say that also is an issue. That's the receiving environment, and that's where the kai is for lots of iwi. Yet, in fact, we can't do anything about it. So congratulations, John, on what you've done, but there's a way to go with all your neighbouring landowners downhill. And thanks for the film, it's great, Jack.
just say before, just in response to that, if you are making submissions on your regional plan, the national policy statement actually says that the regional councils have to take into consideration, not just into consideration, they have to protect the health of what is called receiving environments. So wherever your river comes out, wherever your stream comes out, the estuary or the river mouth, it has to be looked after. But I've yet to see a regional plan that actually does that. So they don't work, they don't actually do that work to look at what would be healthy at the estuary and then work their way back to the land. In theory, this is the theory and the practice thing I was talking about before, but they should be doing that. And so, if we can hold our regional councils to account on that, the policy is there. It just has to be done. It has to be implemented.
Well, I think that's a wrap. Big thanks to everyone for hanging in with the questions. I'm sure there's a few thirsty souls in here and people are probably getting a bit hungry, but thanks so much for coming along. It means a lot to me, and for the cause, and for our environment, we all have a part to play, so here's to moving forward and doing better. Where do I start? We've got quite a few. We've got very smart people here, and it's quite an honour to have them. Toitū this documentary, but also turn up today to help share some insights, some knowledge, wisdom on how we can help get ourselves out of the situation that we're plummeting into pretty quickly. So, on my left here we've got Mani Prickett. Mani and I have done a little bit of campaign work over the years. Mani's an outstanding freshwater advocate. She knows a lot about freshwater ecology, and she's come up from Wellington for the screening in Tauranga and tonight. And a few years ago, Mani and I hit the road to raise awareness around freshwater, and I sort of said yes to a road trip where I thought I was just going to be taking photos of people who are experiencing poor water quality rules and regulations, how that was affecting themselves or their whānau or their sports teams or whatnot. And it very quickly turned into a road trip of making a video every day. So we did 25 videos in 28 days, and that was kind of the first time I'd ever made videos. So I was in the deep end with Marty. But since then, the Choose Clean Water, the group that Mani heads, has raised awareness and helped elevate the freshwater issue right up there. It was number 2 on the election in 2017. So, outstanding work, and thank you very much, Mani, for coming along. John Burke, he's an outstanding land steward, as you've seen from his exemplar farm up there. John's got a deep history in horticulture, and he's a solutionist. He wants to figure out how we can get ourselves out of these problems, and I don't know what else I could say. John's he's an overachiever. And Angus Robson, if you don't know of Angus, he's an engineer or an inventor or a businessman, and he's always putting his mind to the task of how we can do things better, and that might be in his inventions, his machinery, whatever he's putting his mind to. But for the last, I'd say, 10 years, he's put a solid shift in on our environment too, and really has figured out the best ways that we can apply pressure to get the most amount of change with the least amount of input. Angus and I have worked on a few campaigns around forest collapse, so seeing some good results, and also mud farming. That's been a really big one. And at the moment, we are putting pressure on McDonald's, which we're calling Muddonald's, to help sort out their supply chain so that they're no longer part of destroying our environment and human health. So Angus, cheers. And Tipini Ma, it's a real pleasure to have you. It's an honour to have you come and sit with us today. I didn't know Tipini before this, commencing on this film project with Tim, and he was very welcoming to us in the district, and took us up the maunga and gave us a decent insight as to what's going on. And I think the amount of work that Tipini's put in and of carrying the flag for conservation and for human health in this district is outstanding. And yeah, thanks Tiffany for showing up today. And yeah, finally we've got Pa, Rob McGowan. Pa's a rongoa practitioner and and very deep thinker when it comes to how we connect and with our environment, and yeah, offers the solutions and understands our natural world better than most. So yeah, I don't know what more to say other than Pa, thanks so much for joining us today, and I hope we can share your vision and the principles for Te Waiwaka, which I think is something that we should all take home from today. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. Julian Fedder from Makatū, the Makatū Natural Wetland Society and Bay Conservation. Look, I touched on it in the film, was the problem of weeds as being a major one, and I have a personal dislike of pampas, which is a very serious weed. I tried 2 years ago, I think it was, Regional Council had a review of their weed policy, and I tried to get pampas upgraded to be a more seriously weed, partly because it does have an economic impact on the kiwi fruit industry. And I put in a submission to get it changed because of its economic impact was really what I was going, because kiwi fruit ripen at the same time as pampas flowers flower, and the pampas seeds get caught on the kiwi fruit, and therefore they're not saleable if they've got kiwi fruit on them, if they've got pampas seeds on them. So it is an economic issue, and yet I run into a complete brick wall. Apparently it needed something like an act of parliament to change, get this thing upgraded significantly. Does anybody in the panel have any thoughts on this? Because it seems to me that, you know, weeds are a serious problem, but how are we going to get the regional council to be more realistic about and flexible about the weeds that they consider a serious issue?
It's a passion of mine, Julian. I tell you, Simon Upton's just produced a real comprehensive report on weed control in New Zealand, and it's really, you all should read it. You can get it online. But for me, it sort of highlighted what we need to do, right, starting with an Aotearoa strategy. I mean, this is a military campaign we need to almost undertake to get on top of our weeds. So we need to do it at national level, we need to do it at regional level, we need to do it at catchment level, and we need to do it at farm scale. So I'm doing it at farm scale. And I had Regional Council come and audit our wetlands and our ngahere a couple of weeks ago, actually. Now, looking for weeds like woolly nightshade, Taiwanese cherry, weeds like that, wilding pine. And I said to the guy, what are you doing in your rohi? What do you mean? And I said, well, go out the gate, mate, have a wander down the road. So down the road, you've got the likes of Taiwanese cherry. And I come from Tauranga. In the spring, it was about sort of August, you see all these Taiwanese cherry flowers. And the birds just take them into the areas that we're retiring. So we need to work on this all together, and it's an integrated strategy. It's not just about planting ngahere or repo. It's about dealing with the weeds as well. And as Jeff highlighted in his film, it's the weeds and also all the pests and the animal pests. We've got to do it all together. And it's a proper planning strategy you've got to work out.
Yeah, Regional Council, of course, it's priority, you know. There's the list of weeds, and there's this. So, you know, I was an environmental councillor on Regional Council. I didn't care about how much it cost, as long as we fixed it. But of course, when you got money managers in there, councillors, they don't want, oh no, that's going to cost too much, you know. It's look, how can we get rid of all these? It's going to cost a fortune. Yeah, well, it's going to cost a fortune for our kids too, because if we leave it all there, someone's got to do it one day, what's happening? Everything's getting more expensive. So if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. But problem with councils around New Zealand, they're populated with farmers. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. No, Doug Leader took me to code of conduct about 3 times, and I had to stand down for 6 months. So it shut me up. But I was the shit stirring councillor. Always had the other view. So in regional council, that's how they work. They prioritise weeds as they see it, and then that's it. But I mean, we should be attacking everything, And,
I think if we are going to, if we are going to pull off, just let these weeds run their course, which is what we're doing with a lot of weeds, then it's up to the regional council to say, okay, yep, but we're gonna say goodbye to gully forests. So do we want gully forests? Anyone want gully forests? Or coastal bluffs? Or do we want wetlands that avoid it, that don't have any pampas? Or do we just want to let wetlands go? And I think it's up to the regional council to say, do we want gully forests? Put that to the people, because if we do want to have those types of ecosystems, then we need to do weed control. But it's not enough to just go, oh well, that one's not going to get the funding. I think put it to the people, Yeah.
I was just going to say that a lot of campaigns start off with really low public awareness, and certainly for me, weeds, I knew hardly anything about them. This was only 18 months ago. And the more I heard, the more I looked, and the more I wanted to tell everybody. And so you're all here tonight, you've all seen where we're heading. It would be fantastic if you could spread the word, because regional councils do respond to public pressure. And if an issue's not on the table, it doesn't get looked at. And if it is, it does.
Yeah, I just look at the weeds from another point. When someone starts getting pimples and things, you say, better go and get a cream and cure the pimples. Rather look at the cause of the pimples, and then you might actually stop them getting pimples. And I think the trouble with weeds is really just a symptom that our land is sick. So we can forever be killing weeds and planting other things, but let's look for the cause first. And we saw it in the film, that when the bush in the hills is healthy and the undergrowth is healthy, then lots of these problems will actually heal themselves. Just like when you change your diet, lots of your health problems will disappear. And so, let's start from the beginning. What does the land need to be well? And then put that thing back. And so pull all those, as people have been saying, pull everything together. Your forest is not going to be healthy until we actually deal with the pests. So around here in Rotorua, those wallabies that are getting carried away, they can't play rugby, but they can certainly eat our forest. The deer, the goats in some parts of the country, the actual canopy, weeds grow because light gets in. Okay, so if the canopy was restored, lots of the weeds wouldn't be a problem. So let's look at causes and treat the causes, and then we're going to, because the other big issue, and I wrote a report for Simon on that weed thing, that's one of the supplementary reports there. If we actually spray like crazy, is it safe to eat the rongoa, the plants we use for medicine that grow on that land? Are the things we're using to cure our problems causing other problems? And so that's why we've got to learn to step back, work together, treat the causes, and actually believe that we can make a difference, and we certainly can.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pa. I think one of the things, the causes, is the nursery centres, or I call them the weed shops. So you can still go and buy a bangalow palm, and we're seeing bangalow palms spread pretty quickly. So.
Sorry, I was just desperate to talk. I agree, we totally need to reconnect, and I believe that most people in terms of weeds don't even see them. And I think they don't see them because they see green and they assume green is good. And I think that is the real issue that somebody said, I wrote it down actually, we are illiterate when it comes to the environment around us. and lots of us are, and that's one of the things I believe is the root cause of the problem. Just to make my own input into this in terms of weeds as well, I complained to Doc Rotorua back in June 2021 about the honeysuckle on the Tarawera Trail. It took me 6 months to get a reply and get the email to the right person. And it's taken me, where are we now? We are October, are we? Yes. So it's taken me until October this year to actually sit down 2 weeks ago with Doc and the local iwi to actually come up with a community agreement to work on that honeysuckle that is in that picture behind you. So no, I'm not saying that that's not good, as in like wow, because we are just at the start. And I'm using this opportunity to sort of say it's a project that's at the start, and I'm going to need you guys if we want to change some of that. So yeah, sorry.
Hey, good on
Take
you.
over a free marketing opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really heartening when you see people putting their hand up and actually going in there and doing the weed work. Last night at the screening, we had a councillor knees stand up and say that, well, more people should be pulling out weeds in their backyard and sort of put it back onto the people who, and I think there's a lot of people in this room that are doing that. So yeah, we also want to see more commitment from agencies.
Just following up on that, if you don't expect DOC or regional council to do it all, it's not going to happen. It's up to all of us. We're all part of the solution, and we all need to be doing stuff, not pointing the finger. I mean, DOC, the political masters who pull the tune on how much money they've got, that's not DOC's arse problem. That comes from the politicians. And I guess it's a bit the same of the regional council. However, in my experience, just to get this right, and I'm part of a land care group at Lake Paraka, we've been going for 20 years. We've got a forest third project there as well that's also been going that long. It needs input from people like you and me. It doesn't happen otherwise.
Rob?
Really, I'm just following up on what's just been said by the last couple of people is how do we take control of this ourselves? What can we do in our own backyards to reconnect with nature and feel that drive, personal drive to heal the land and reconnect? It seems to me that maybe the people that govern us at the moment don't really know what's going on. It's been quite clear over the last few years, I think, so let's take control. What would you guys suggest to do in our own backyards? Possibly grow more food so we reduce the demand for meat, or plant highways of natives everywhere so that the correct seeds are spread on their own. What would you guys suggest for us to do personally in our backyards?
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Yeah, so I'm going to, I'll just maybe bring like a slightly different view in here, because I think it is really important that we all, take action ourselves, and that we're involved, that we're involved personally, and that we're doing things like backyard trapping and things like that. All that stuff is really important, 100%. And there are systemic things that make individual actions less effective than they would otherwise be. And so for me, I think, yes, do those individual actions, do that stuff, go out and be part of those land care groups, go out and be part of those catchment groups, go and do those weed projects, so important. And also shift and also raise your sights up to where there are systemic problems, because it's really, we all do work where, despite the best efforts of a community, despite the passion and the drive of a community, communities get thwarted all the time, and they run out of energy, and they run out of that sort of spark that they got at the beginning because of the systemic failures of the institutions that they have around them and the barriers that the institutions around them put in place. And so this is the endless sort of conversation that we get in about, individual actions that people can take for climate change, for example. Those are really important, and at the same time, alone, they're not going to do the mahi that we need done. So I'm sure other people will have much more sort of hands-on, sort of practical, in your backyard advice. But my advice is to look up a little bit higher, to start organising within your communities about maybe where you see the systemic problems, and start putting pressure on, if you start at regional council level, that's a really good place to start. You can go even higher, you can go to central government level, but start putting pressure on those places where there are systemic barriers that are going to prevent the success of the ground and grassroots level stuff, because we're up against big environmental change, but also hugely resourced industries, which will make it very difficult for our tree in the ground to thrive.
So far advanced, there was actually nothing they could do about it. In fact, there was a really good opportunity. They could have said, hey, yes, that's a good idea, let's get AFCO to use something better there, and then we can start cleaning up the river. But if AFCO's got a wetland full of the stuff, there's not a lot you can do further down the river.
No, it's not very heartening, I think. It's very disheartening to hear, and we need to, again, put pressure on regional councils to, actually take a step forward and not just say, okay, thanks. Got one over here, Peter.
Yes, please. So thank you, Jim, and Jeff and Tim, and fellow panellists, for your presentation. My priority is on water and the consumption of traditional foods from the water. Saw some clips about harvest areas. My concern is about the safety and well-being of my people and the general public who unwittingly consume shellfish that have toxins that are dangerous, above health safety levels, as I understand it. You can confirm that, please, when you reply. But if they are above the standards in terms of health and safety, well-being of the human population, then there ought to be an immediate remedy. As I understand the law, and it's only as good as the enforcer, the Resource Management Act requires all of us as adults to avoid, remedy, or mitigate adverse effects. You have shown me adverse effects tonight, and I go back to the water and the traditional tribal food gathering areas. We have a serious matter where some of us are in the knowledge tonight that the people who are gathering and consuming that food are being poisoned as we sit here. Now, are we going to be complicit in allowing this to continue to happen beyond tonight? But each of us has to measure ourselves under the law. The law requires, and this is the Resource Management Act, requires every person to stand to account. Now, I've battled and I've stood to account. And I've taken and had this district council prosecuted for polluting a waterway, the Puarenga River, or upper catchment, to the Repo stream, and I'm proud of that. What I didn't achieve was to enable the children to go back under that traditional swimming area under the Whakareorewa Bridge to swim, because the pollution will continue to flow at levels that are totally unsafe for them to swim in. Now, the law it looks tough on paper, but the strength is in the enforcement officer and the noisy public that bring pressure on the enforcement officer to do your job. Because what I'm seeing here tonight, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there are officials in key places that could bring remedy or avoidance, remedy and mitigation immediately. I'm seeing them acting in a manner that is described as malfeasance. They are failing their legal duties and putting people at risk by allowing them, without a public notice on the side of those waterways where they gather those foods. They have not put those notices to warn them that the safe levels are many times exceeded. That's what I've got to say tonight. That's really why I wanted to come here and say, how long are we going to watch? The first word is avoid. The second one is remedy. And the third one is, and I don't really like it, but is mitigate. Now, John, thank you. You're mitigating. It was good to see your presentation. You bring back native plants. But as for waterways, there's an immediate danger to people, their health and well-being by consuming poison, toxic food. And somebody better do something about it. I don't know which somebody, but I'll do my best as an individual. Kia ora.
Thank you, Peter. Kia ora.
I'll just talk. Okay. I've worked in basically trying to get regional councils to be held to account for over 10 years now, and it's not easy. And what Peter's talked about happens all over the country, particularly Canterbury, Southland. Like Bay of Plenty's got problems, but it's by no means the worst regional council in the country. And talking about poisoning, there's nitrate poisoning now of the Canterbury Plains. It's poisoning people in Christchurch, Timaru. And they're looking at spending $350 million on ratepayers' money to mitigate nitrate. That's only happened in the last 25 years because of decisions made to intensify dairying and have high levels of irrigation. And their rates takes only $100 million all in. So, and you know, who's going to pay? But what I really wanted to say, also in answer a little bit to what you were saying, was that the regional councils are unaccountable. I'll go back a little bit. There's a crisis of democracy at the moment around the world. People don't trust their institutions because their institutions are untrustworthy. And when you go to get remedies, you don't get them. You get stonewalled. The reaction to this documentary overnight from the regional council was complete defensiveness. They tried to have it put off. They tried to have the publicity shut down. They've tried to head things off and say who did this and who did that so they can look like they're doing something. And it's a joke. And they're not the only ones. It doesn't matter which regional council you go to, they're all the same. And I want to show you something. Tim, or can we scroll to a certain picture at Waitahi, please? Can we shut the lights down just a little bit or all together just so you get a good look? Yeah. Okay, that's an unlined pond from a dairy farm at Waitahi. And you can see above, I'm just going to get up and point to it. These are tracks from a digger. This is the dump out from the digger, and this is the drain where the digger's either lifted the stuff or you can see more digger marks. He's heaved it all the way in. That connects directly to the Waitahi estuary and those shellfish beds that we were looking at. And that pond belongs to the chairman of Bay of Plenty Regional Council. Yeah. And that guy got re-elected this morning as the chairman, and he's also looking at becoming the chairman of all of the regional council collective, which is called the
No, not LGNZ. It's the regional council. Yeah. And when you've got someone with that much power who has got pecuniary advantage, that means you make money out of your own decisions depending on how you play them. And that guy is making decisions on things which make him more money or less money. And that oughtn't to be allowed. But that's one of the things we're up against. And then we've got that council who's, like most of them around New Zealand, have been elected by people with a lot of skin in the game. And the people with the most skin in the game are the people with the most to lose, and they're farmers. And so what you tend to find is, and Marnie can extend on this a little bit on just how hard it is to push up back against these lobby groups, is that they're broken. And the institutions are broken, and we don't want to smash the institutions. We want good institutions. So we want people to say, clean your own houses and get better. And it's got to start with not putting up with that kind of behaviour, which is all legal. We were told that that's been checked, was it 8 times in the last 12 years? And it's never failed. So if that's okay, then what are we doing? That's hopeless.
How do we stop it from being the chair?
Beg your pardon?
How do we stop it from being the chair?
What's the
it happened this morning. It's done.
I was just going to go back to the question that we had before about like what is it that we do, and also to talk more about. I mean, I don't need to. I know that you're right about those shellfish, and it's an absolute disgrace, and people getting sick from eating mahinga kai and kai moana is just an absolute disgrace. And so just to sort of talk about, well, what could be done in this situation, and that's why I think we should be looking up. You know, we should be planting our trees, but we should be also looking up a little bit higher to where we can put the pressure on. And I think that the chair of the regional council would be a really good pressure point. That, you know, we've got a group of very interested people here tonight, grab people's email addresses and start organising. And the other thing, just in relation to people getting sick, one of the things is we actually, almost all of our regional councils, if you ask them how many enforcement officers they have, they usually have maybe 1, 2. Sometimes district councils will have like a 0.5, like a half-time person doing enforcement of all the consents in the whole district. And so one of the other things to do would be to, make some good friends tonight, get organising to put pressure on them to have, a staff of 10 enforcement officers, like put a number on it. Say we want you to prioritise enforcement. 20. Put 20 enforcement officers for the region. You're going to prioritise enforcement. As you say, Peter, we've got the rules. The law is on our side. That was what the film said. But they are not taking it seriously because they do have skin in the game, but they're not feeling the heat. That's the reality of it. They're not feeling the heat from us. And I tell you what, once they start feeling the heat, they will act much more quickly.
One thing about the regional council is it's probably the richest regional council beside Auckland, of course, but it owns the port of Tauranga. 54.9% of the port of Tauranga is owned by the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. And if you saw his rhetoric, the chairman was 40 million in cash comes every year. It was, when I was on there 4 years ago, it was like getting up to about 27, 28 million, but he was quoting in his campaign spiel that there's 40 million. So every year has been given from the port of Toitū, because that is now #1 port in New Zealand. Auckland can't go anywhere, and Littleton's too small. So it's putting pressure on definitely on him. He's on the Port of Tauranga board, and also now with this new regional council, leaders forum or chairs forum or something like that, it'll be. So they have all of a sudden there's already LGNZ and there's other, there's all these guys getting together, and our Ken Shirley's on the regional council now, another farmer. Oh, sorry.
Could I just add, guys, don't just stop at the regional council. Go to the brand owners. Go to Fonterra. They've got the Tiaki statement. Go to their website and read it. And then look, are they walking the talk? I mean, New Zealand, Aotearoa, we're falling behind the rest of the world. We're becoming laggards in terms of caring for our environment. It's a bloody disgrace. And so doing all this namby-pamby greenwash stuff gets stuck into the brand owners as well, because they need to start leaning right on guys like their suppliers. It's called responsible procurement. So guys like that farmer there, he gets his milk fat payout or his milk solid payout cut, or you say, if you don't clean up your act, we're not taking your milk. Same with the kiwi fruit, all of that. We should be leaning on the brand companies, the silver fern farms and everything as well. These guys need to walk the talk, and they've got more tools in the toolbox than our regional council as well. Our regional council are the last line of defence, and they need to stand firm.
I've got hello. I've got just a quick question. Is this documentary available to send to people? Because it's, in terms of solutions, it's grown awareness, and particularly amongst people that are not necessarily active in the environmental space. So is this doco available to send, and I guess a website that people can refer to get involved?
Yeah, for sure. There is a website, toitū.watch. We've got another screening tomorrow night, and then we'll most likely look at putting the link out for the public to share around. There is a clipboard going around the room, so if you want to put your name and email on there, we'll make sure that you're updated when that does go live. And if you've got any skills or anything that you might be up for contributing, you can pop them down on that clipboard too. We're sort of trying to get a bit of a swell going with support and see how we can move forward together here. Thank you for your question.
I live on the Waititi stream, and the stream has been fenced off for more than 30 years. And the regional council have been very, very helpful in ensuring that stream, the stock stay out of the stream, and very supportive over many years of my weed spraying and weed control. I just want to say several things. We've just got to get on and plant. I know several people have said get the pests, get the weeds out first. If I waited to get the pests out, I would never do any planting. The hares have become a major issue, and that I'm surrounded by neighbours, and they've all got hares. We've all got possums in our neighbouring property, so I think we've just got to get on and plant, number one, and at the same time do the pest control, do the weed control. But the other thing I wanted to ask, there's Montbretia coming down the stream, along with many, many other weeds that I control on this 2 kilometres of stream. Does anybody have any concerns about this weed Montbretia? And should we be worrying about it? Because I've asked the land management officers from the regional council whether I should be targeting this, and they say, look, it's really no point, it's out of control.
Yeah, that type of attitude does annoy me. Thanks for your 2 points you've raised. Montbretia, we've all got it around most of the country. If you are going to control a weed that is in a part of a catchment, like partway down a stream, or like Tradescanthia or Wandering Jew, there's sort of no point going after it in a big way and using a lot of chemicals until you've gone upstream where it begins. So it is looking at these catchments as taking a catchment approach for weed control and moving down with weeds like that. But I think first of all it is weeds that can penetrate what Pa was saying. Once you've got the forest healthy, there are a handful of weeds that can get in and grow in the dark, and those are the ones that we need to be vigilant on and looking at where they spread, how they spread. So getting on and planting, it is a very positive thing, but we do run the risk of creating weed dispersal corridors for shade-tolerant plants like privet, tree privet, honeysuckle.
We've got these weed dispersal corridors. Every river is a weed dispersal corridor. And I've got about, I don't know how many properties above me, and I don't know how many weeds that I have to target with different sprays for multiple types of weeds. It's just, it is a major, but you know, we've just got to do it because you can't get everybody upstream to do their weed control.
Yeah, good on you for doing your bit.
Tēnā rā tātou katohi, mihana ki a koe te rangatira te pene, mihana ki a koe wā. Me koutou hoki te ropu whakahaere, me koutou me moto hapuri hui mai nei tēnei pō. I was at the inaugural meeting of the Regional Council this morning, swearing an oath as a member of Kure, one of the Māori wards on the Regional Council, my second term. We have 3 Māori ward members on that board. Our focus is on bringing a Māori perspective into the Regional Council. I am no way going to defend the Regional Council tonight at all. I'm not going to damn them at all either. I'm on the council to look for solutions. And I'll give you, in the conversation I'm hearing, and my fellow councillors, my other 2, from Kohi and Maua, we're adamant that it will take a united voice to bring the changes that we want. It won't be business as usual, it has to be transformation. And you're correct, Doug was nominated again as the chair, and Jane Neves as the deputy chair. My colleagues, my Māori colleagues, took the step of nominating me to be the chair, and nominating Toitū to be the deputy chair, because we do see that business as usual needs to change, and it needs a different dimension to make a change. And why I say that, when I come down to the Māori perspective, and trying to reintegrate some of those traditional values, of kaitiakitanga, manaakitanga, whanaungatanga, all of the tapas, and actually giving back to nature rather than taking from nature, which I think is where the problem is. I also want to make a comment about the Waihi estuary, one of the most polluted in the country, because I see it up there, and I saw Alison there, and I know that a number of volunteer groups are doing some good work. The problem is that there are bits and pieces being done, but the solution comes into integrating those solutions together and understanding what the left and the right hand are doing. As an example of that, and in the Waihi estuary, and I'll give this as an example because it's a good one. I mean, as a baby boomer, as a child, that's where we got all our kaimun from. And we camped out there regularly, and we take the food back to feed our communities. That was happening even when I was a teenager, but later on it was no longer happening. And today, as Peter has said, our people are being poisoned by taking some of that shellfish. Huge. Our kaimwana beds have been decimated. So one of the things that the Regional Council, sitting in its space, was reflecting on, we've got these activities, how can we, as a regulator, end up helping in this particular space and providing us support for the solutions? My comment was this, and it was reflected as well in the work that Alison and them are doing, good work, but the people who have had 800 years of continued connection to that place were not featuring. In fact, Ngāti, the 5 key hapu iwi entities around that particular estuary, Ngāti Mākino o Tamaraka, Ngāti Whakahim, Tapuika, Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Pikiau, they weren't featuring. In fact, they were having some debates and discussions about who had the mana whenua, right? So they're ingrained in that. So as a member, a first termer on the Regional Council, I said to Doug, I said, look, you aren't going to fix this by getting your operators going into that space, because they cannot talk to the governors and the leaders of those iwi spaces. They cannot. But as a governor on the Regional Council, I can take my Regional Council hat off and go and organise those groups, governor to governor. We did that, pulled them together, now referred to as Te Wahapu o Waihi. Spent the last 8 months pulling together a major submission to collectivise our collective interest in how we might provide support for the solution. So now you've got all of those 5 entities around the table, been working with MFE to actually try and integrate the plan. This is not to impugn all the activities that are already happening, but to provide some sense of cohesion. So Ngāti Pikia were doing a little bit, Ngāti Whakahemo were doing a bit, Ngāti Whakaua were doing a bit, and Tapuika were doing a bit. So they're all doing their little bits, but nothing was coming together. They were so busy sometimes arguing the mana. What's actually happened in this particular application now is that they've actually pulled those resources together and actually come together to say, okay, we'll recognise component parts and we'll see where the gaps are. And we'll look at the wider community and what they're doing and see where the gaps are and see if we can start integrating a solution. Because that's what it's going to take, a combined solution. Ain't going to take the bureaucracies to do that. Not going to take the regulators to do that. You'll get the same old response. It's going to take us to be able to integrate our interests and actually push hard with a whole essence of scale. That's what it's going to take. And I use the Waihi history. Why? For me personally, it's really close to my heart. Close to my heart. And it's a great one to work on. So I just want to put that, there's no defence here. Quite frankly, from a Māori perspective and a point of view, we want change. And today, this morning, at our inaugural meeting where we signed off, we made an effort to make change, but we knew we wouldn't win it. We got 3 Māori on there and 11, 8 of them from Toitū. So you can understand the challenges that we would have. Having said that, I have utmost respect for quite a few of those individuals, because we can agree to disagree, we can reason around that table, and we can make changes, and we don't get everything we want. But one thing we can do is pull our people together to act in scale, and then put the pressure on, and actually emerge the solution from the community up, not the top down. We talk about going to the parliamentarians, yeah, you can do that. But ultimately, it's how we actually aggregate our interests on the ground and put pressure on the system. So I just wanted to share that, and before I have to go home, don't fire any bullets at me, but I mean, the reality is we're there to make a difference. And we might be only 3. It is a game of numbers. We do have some friends close to the line, so we do believe we can pull them across the line with good reason. And the fact of the matter, what are we there for? To keep your bloody seats warm or to make a difference? So that's my
Thank you again, Jeff. I just want to add to what I said before. I saw some water sample testing going on, and it makes me wonder whether or not those people taking the sample testing are getting those tests analysed. If they're getting those tests analysed for the purpose of evidence that would stand in any courtroom. The reason I ask this is whether or not we form a non-government organisation to provide our own evidence that we gather to prove that the water pollution levels are at extremely high levels, dangerous to human health. We then compel the law enforcement officers under the legislation, as we required over the District Council, who was in October last year prosecuted, found to be supposed to be self-monitoring their own clean operations, but were actually acting, as the court found, in a criminal manner. They were charged under the Crimes Act. And we could charge the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, should it be going up the same road, showing negligence when it has a statutory obligation to enforce the law, namely the Resource Management Act, to bring protection over the natural resources. If we have a chairman of a Bay of Plenty Regional Council and has not declared a conflict of interest over this property, and whether, I don't know if anyone's got a certificate of title over that property that we can prove who the owner is, who is in charge of the operation, and that sample testing is taken at the point at the source, or just down from the source. Looking at that picture, I can't quite see. But those are two important pieces of evidence. We can then proceed to do something real, bypassing all of the political stuff and go straight for the jugular. I'm talking about law enforcement of law against environmental protection officers who are failing. And I said before, malfeasance is a serious crime.
Yeah, we've been down, I think we've, over the last, well, certainly when I've been involved, the last 10,000 hours of work that I've put into it, we've tried everything. And we found that one thing really works, and it's reputational damage. And anybody can do reputational damage. You don't need to be a lawyer or have $1 million. You can just go in, find the person who is right in the crosshairs, because at the end of the day, we've got a big organisation. Within the organisation are teams, within the teams are individuals, and those individuals have names and they make decisions. And these decisions are what we're dealing with. And we also find it's a given that a bureaucracy is there to avoid accountability. So if you try and get accountability, you won't. It's bricked in. And also another thing that I work on as a sort of an aphorism is if you've got a bad outcome, you've got bad policy. So go look at the policy that's causing the bad outcome and then find the individual who's responsible for that, either delivering or generating that policy, and it might be a team or a person, and go after them and tell them you're coming after them and say what you're going to do to their reputation, and they'll respond. And we've got excellent results at all levels of government, local government. It works.
And industries.
And industry.
Yeah,
and I'm talking about the top of Fonterra, the top of ministries, whether it's the Ministry of Agriculture or the Ministry for the Environment, and regional council CEOs. I can pick up the phone to these people and they will respond. But it's, you know, it's something that you can all do if you know how to go about it, and we are happy to help.
Thank you, Angus. That leads me, I want to pass the mic over to Rob McGowan to speak a little bit about Te Waiwaka as a solution for us all to, yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Bob.
Because we're all here tonight because we are really concerned, and Jeff and Tim and the team have done a wonderful job in making us better informed, because it's terrible when you have a discussion about people who have a lot to say but don't know what they're talking about. So we've got some good information, but you know, we've got to look to the future, okay? The long-term future. See, this country has been developed because we need to develop our economy so that we can pay our way and all that. And so the economy has been the reason why we've done lots of things that we know were wrong, because we need the money. And of course the government's panicking now because COVID's cost so much, how are we going to pay the money back? But what we've got to do, in actual fact, we're not going to get answers to the problems we have out of the thinking that created them. We need a new start based on new priorities if we're going to get a solution that turns things around, because, you know, we can talk forever, except we haven't got forever, because as you can see with climate change, with the collapse of biodiversity, things are getting really bad, and we're not going to be here much longer unless we actually pull finger and do something. So I go back to the old people. You know, and that's the thing that Jeff put in the film, Whenua, when the land is well, people are well. So if we're going to have a future, the first thing is to make sure that land is well. Because Papa Toitū, all life comes from her, okay? Not from Fonterra and the millions, or the kiwi fruit industry and the millions, from the wellness of land, because they depend on the wellness of land. Number two, we're not the bosses. We're not the tuakana. We're the taina. And Te Arawa knows, especially when the taina oversteps the tuakana, chaos follows. And we've got plenty of chaos around us. Number three, life exists not because you've got big pine trees or lovely kiwi fruit vines. It's because a healthy forest is a family of things that help each other to stand together. So our priority, and that's where you find Māori. You find Māori in the connections which sustain life and make it thrive. So our role is to look after the connections that actually make this environment healthy. So we're talking about caring for our riverbanks so that our river and water can be clean and so on. That's our role, care for the connections. That means that we have to get over ourselves. All this personal ambition and stuff is a luxury we can't afford. So if your head is bigger than your shoulders, get out of it because you're a bloody nuisance. The only people we want in leading positions are those who are there for us, not for me. And we've got too much of the me in this world of ours. You know, and you know, we probably moan about those fellas that protested at Parliament. But we actually are no better ourselves because we claim the right to develop our businesses and make the money even though we know it's stuffing up the environment. But we've got the right. And then the last thing is this, that all life depends on the tiniest living creatures, the microbes. You know, trees grow strong because of the microbes and invertebrates in the soil. Look after them and life will hold out. But so many of the solutions that we use, and the use of chemical to destroy weeds, one example, destroys the microbes which actually enable life to happen. Now, if we make those our way of doing things, we've got a different starting point. The starting point is look after Papatūānu, Mother Earth, know our place and treasure it, care for those connections and all the life that belongs. Actually, we can do it. And so one of the things we do with Te Waka is, okay, how do we get that into government policy? How do we get that into the new Resource Management Act? Change our priorities. Not for the economy, not for making money, not for paying whatever else I'm going to do with it. Our thing is to look for our future, not my future, because, you know, I'm getting a bit old, or our kids' future, but our children's children's children. Way ahead, look for those who are unborn, work for them, not for our bank statement, and then we may, in actual fact, really have a future. Because the other thing I can say is this, that all around the country I see so many wonderful, wonderful people doing amazing things. All we've got to do is connect. Our differences are the gifts that we bring, they're not the obstacles. If we can actually learn how to work together with respect and with real positive thoughts, we can actually change this whole country, and the councils and the government will follow us.
Thank you very much, Pa. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. We've got to get out of this building eventually, and some kind donors come along and put on a bit of a spread out the back there. So, you know, we should probably make the most of that too. Yeah, just before we move on to one last real quick statement. Yeah, we've got up the front here, we've got some Te Waiwaka handbooks. Now, I do recommend you grab one of these if you'd like to make a koha for one. If you've got any change, that'd be brilliant too. The principles are in there, and I think, yeah, Te Waiwaka is something to support. It's got a life of its own now, so cheers.
Congratulations on an excellent production.
I'll just do a karakia whakamutunga. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, tā ta whai o tō tātou ariki i o matua nui, me te aro o te atua, me te whiwhinga taitanga, ki te wairua tapu ake ake. Āmeni. Jeff's definitely got the voice. The man with the voice.